Your proudest accomplishment.
Raising my daughter to be the woman she is.
One leader you admire and why.
Oh, wow. The easy answer would be Jesus, because he was a servant leader and knew how to fire people when they needed to be fired. In the natural, to paraphrase a Chinese philosophy, who, when their job is done and the aim fulfilled, the people say, look what we did, as opposed to look what the leader did. And I've had a few leaders like that, but picking one is very difficult.
How would you like to be remembered, Glenn?
There's part of me that hopes that I'm not remembered at all, that I exemplify that Lao Shu philosophy. But, if people remember me as a pretty good teacher, that they learned something, if people remember me as a pretty good leader, that they enjoyed working in the organizations that I led, that would be nice.
What drains you?
Wow. Being married is an interesting relationship as well. And I love my wife dearly. She was an amazing woman. She was a petite thing. And as Shakespeare said, though she be petite, she be fierce. And she was one fierce person. But she knew how to push my buttons. Not that she did it deliberately. We had the occasional discussion. She passed away a year and a half ago. But we were married 47 years, 3 months, and 8 days. And she was an amazing woman.
What energizes you, Glenn?
Teaching and doing research.
What advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
To enjoy life, to embrace life. The career changes I've made, I feel like I've stumbled into two amazing careers, and I'm looking forward to stumbling into a third career after I retire from Ivy.
The greatest challenge to leadership today?
If you're in a leadership position, getting over yourself. I think most leaders need to have a sense of humility. Like a CEO should know less about the area of expertise of their direct reports. That should mean that they should be humble because they don't know as much as their direct reports. Secondly, if they do know more than one of the direct reports, and I put a time frame on it, say a year, like say they were the senior VP marketing and they got the CEO job. Well, if they know more than their replacement as a senior VP of marketing a year later, well, then either they should step down as CEO or they should fire the senior VP of marketing and get a new one. But thinking about it that way suggests that senior leaders of organizations like CEOs should have a sense of humility because they know less than those who work with them.
The best advice you've ever received?
I guess one thing that stands out was when I was finishing the first year of my doctoral studies, one of my profs, great guy, Bob Hoskison, grabbed me at the end of my first year, and I'd taken 2 doctoral seminars with him. And he said, Glenn, you have a real passion as a practitioner. And he said, but you have to learn how to be an academic. So I want you to bank your passion for practitioner. I want you to bank that like you'd bank a fire for the next 2 or 3 years and learn to be an academic. And then afterwards, after you graduate, after you finish, then combine the two.
The biggest risk you've ever taken?
So leaving the Navy at the age of 41, and where I had 14 years of tenure, and going into a job where I had a 2-year contract, and realizing that at the end of that contract, I could be looking for a job, not necessarily in academia, and definitely not in the Navy. I guess the second major risk that I would offer, when I left Memorial in 2001 to come to Ivy, at Memorial I was tenured, I was an associate professor. I was serving as the Associate Dean of Research and Graduate Programs. To come to Ivy, I was 52 years old and I had to give up tenure and become an assistant professor. I gave up being an associate professor. And obviously I gave up my Associate Dean job and became a newbie, rookie professor at Ivy. And, given the tenure requirements and the promotion requirements, I could have found myself at the age of 58 being denied tenure and promotion to associate professor here at Ivy and having to look for another academic job somewhere else at the age of 58.
Your wildest aspiration?
Oh, well, part of me believes I've achieved that. I came to Ivy and I became a full professor. That's pretty cool. I don't know, I'm gratified, I'm humbled, I'm delighted that, some people saw something in me that I was able to achieve, becoming a full professor at, quote, one of the best, if not the best business schools in Canada. Going forward, I don't know yet. One of my aspirations is to live a long, healthy, very healthy life. There's a phrase, live long, live strong, and finish strong.
Your biggest fear?
I try not to fear. The Bible is pretty blunt about do not fear. If I do feel any fear coming upon me, I do what the Bible says to do, which is cast it aside and don't fear. My biggest fear is that I would fear something.
Your greatest gifts.
That's a better question to ask my daughter about me. I think she'd say that I'm a very loving father, grandfather, husband. I'm a very generous person, a very supportive person. She knows she can come to me with any concerns she has about her family, about me, about like if she sees me doing something wrong, she knows she can call me on it. From a leadership perspective, one of my officers that served with me in the Navy on one of my ships decades later said that he remembered me as leading with a light touch, but there was no doubt who was in command of the ship. And I think as a professor, I was talking to one of my former students yesterday, and she described me and another colleague that I have as two of her favorite professors, and then she described both of us as exercising tough love in the classroom.
A behavior or habit that you think may be holding you back.
Procrastination. I'm a big procrastinator. I love procrastinating, and I probably do it more than I should. I probably could have written more articles and got more journal articles out the door and more cases written if I weren't such a procrastinator.
One book that has influenced you the most.
Oh, wow. Well, if you saw my library at home, which probably now has, I don't know, somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 books, but I'd have to say the Bible. I think the Bible has influenced me the most in terms of what I believe about being a husband, a father, a grandfather, a leader.
So very last part, I'm going to call out some words, Glenn, and you tell me in one sentence what that word means to you. Leadership.
Okay. The ability to influence people to do what's best for the organization, both in the long term and the short term.
Business.
A term that's used to describe for-profit organizations and should be subsumed under the description of organizations, realizing that organizations can be both for-profit and not-for-profit.
Technology.
Technology is a source of competitive parity, sometimes occasionally a source of temporary competitive advantage that can be competed away. Because once an organization gets a piece of technology, it's not very long before it gets adopted throughout an industry. Therefore, technology can only at best be a source of temporary competitive advantage and will eventually be competed away.
Culture.
Culture has been described as going to eat strategy for breakfast. I don't believe that. I think Peter Drucker was wrong. I think culture should come from your strategy, and if you get the strategy right, and the culture supports the strategy, then that's a good relationship between culture and strategy. Where I think Peter Drucker may be right is that if you've got a really bad strategy and the culture isn't supporting the strategy, then it's possible that culture could negatively impact your strategy and make it even worse than it is.
Politics.
I've been told I'm too political and I need to rein in my political leanings and not talk about politics.
Wisdom.
Wisdom comes with age and experience. I'm not saying that younger people can't be wise. I've seen many young people who are wise. Knowledge is different from wisdom, and knowledge you can gain in a degree in working in a particular organization. You don't need a degree to get knowledge. You can gain it in other ways. Wisdom is using the knowledge you've gained in a good and wise way. The Bible says wisdom comes with gray hair.
Success.
Don't strive for it. Do what you know to be right and let success come if it comes. Don't think of success as the opposite of failure. Think of failure as stepping stones to success, if there is such a thing.
Happiness.
Happiness comes from within yourself. I think too many people look to others, particularly their spouses or their kids. My wife and I were in a Bible study about 20 years ago, and this very wise young woman, we were in our 40s at the time. She was about 23, and we were discussing a person close to us and how he seemed to be relying on us for his happiness. And she looked at us and said, well, that's the wrong way to think about it. You are responsible for your own happiness.
Right.
You're not responsible for making someone else happy. And boy, we probably understood that, but we'd never thought about it that succinctly, that concisely before. I'm still friends on Facebook with that young woman, and every time I see her face, I remember what wise wisdom she gave us.